Good morning, people. I'm going to give folks just a couple of minutes to trickle on in. Apropos of nothing, Ms. Parks, have you been getting reports about emails bouncing to listservs, etc.?
For a lot of UVA folks, we get complaints that UVA's system aren't letting them in, but not from anyone else. I can send links out again if you just want to put in the chat who might need them.
Sure. Actually, I attempted to send a message to the listserv, the HAC listserv, and got smacked by your spam filter. And I attempted to make a reply to an email from Alex this morning where he copied counsel and it spanked me again.
Oh, that's not good. I will talk to IT about that.
Okay. And then let's see who needs direct links. I'll shoot you a list if anybody I think might have missed it. So. All right. Uh-huh. All right, folks, good morning. This is the HAC Allocations Subcommittee meeting for the review of CAF applications for spring 2022. We do have a quorum for the subcommittee present in 3 voting members, 4 actually. So I'm going to go ahead and get the beginnings rolling. We got a lot to get through. And we're going to probably have to do part of this by with some final product being shot to me via email, just based on the volume that we have to do, but thought we should get started. I think we all know each other here, so we can sort of jump right in. If folks feel that that's probably the step we want to take. We do have minutes from the last meeting if somebody wants to take a peek at those and see if we can get that sorted. I included it from the last. Did I even include them? So. Apparently not, but I have them. Stand by. So, meanwhile, in the link, you should have found we were able to get a hold of the draft staff report to council. I have not had a chance to read it, but it is in there for your review at this point. And as soon as my search function, I will drop the minutes in there as well. As far as format today, I do not have a magic bullet of the best way to do this. It is a lot of material to go through. Maybe I would suggest that we sort of go, does it make sense to go through each one in sequence? Does it make sense to sort of deal with them in a gestalt? Do we want to look at tiers of funding first? I'm open to suggestions as to how you want to best approach this material.
Phil, if I may, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I may suggest maybe doing an overview of each application to see if there's any additional questions that stand out before we get started, and then just go.
And I've just dropped the meeting, the minutes from the last meeting, such that it was just for form's sake into the link. So yes, ma'am. I think that makes as much sense as anything else. And do you want to I think that rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, that we at least start and use the summary page provided by the staff review as the order to go in. It's also the order on the scoring sheet. Does that make sense?
Sounds like a plan.
Well, I don't know if it's a plan. Let's not dignify it, but at least it's a way forward. Okay. Okay, so I think so the first two up, and as a general overview, they all follow the same format as best they could. The first two up are the leaps. The guts of both of those are very similar, capacity, experience, etc. So I think that's sort of a 2-for-1 shot. But let's start with that. The first one up was the owner-occupied portion. Anyone want to start with a general discussion of that and how it compared. And before we get, and I think that'll give an idea too of how you found the scoring as well. Some of these, the scoring was, seemed extremely straightforward. Some of it was, you had to squint pretty hard, but if we just want to sort of proceed through with them on the leap and use them as an, and sort of use them as a sample as well. Any particular questions, concerns, or thoughts on the LEAP project, owner occupied, and to the extent it follows to the renter as well?
Was basically the same, just changing out owner versus renter, correct?
I believe so. And of course, that changes one of the equity questions substantially, but I don't know what else to do about that. So
I can say that upon reviewing of all of them, I did not find that anybody did not qualify for funding, did not fall out because of any particular reason. Everyone is entitled to funding.
well, entitled to the consideration. Everyone followed all the rules.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Although, you know, and most of them dotted virtually every I and T too. And a lot of it's subjective in terms of, you know, how much detail on a budget can you have for some of these? Not much. So
if I can maybe jump on that to consider first, for the point I raised last week, all the applications discuss spending the money essentially in this fiscal year, except for the MACA project, where, you know, it had things like site plan approval in the coming fiscal year, but then the closing process / construction start wouldn't be till December 2024. And it's not on the scoring worksheet, but the NOFA said that it has to be used within, or at least planned to be used within 24 months of the contract issuance, which is within the next 3 months from now. So I guess the question is, like, are we saying that some of those earlier activities are eligible for funding or for use of the funds? Or are we saying that that's not a disqualifying feature?
Good question.
I've seen the staff report that it says staff is recommending to make that funding contingent on getting the LIHTC. I don't actually know where the staff report went. It's one of these tabs. But as I see it, even, actually, I take that back. This schedule has the LIHTC application going in 2023. So the staff recommendation is if that timeline moves up, do we have an indication that they're planning on moving it up, or that I cannot understand?
Right. So the question on the timeline, and it's unclear here. All right. Yeah, and it is driven, but yeah, the question was, and then the issue with the CAF rules is can we use anything? Soft costs have to come from elsewhere unless they can come from nowhere else. Basically how that's written, right? NOFA says, I mean, that's not exactly what it says. Let me see if I can grab the copy of it. And
it's page 5 of the staff report is what I was talking about. As I recall, the staff report said something about like up to 10% of funds can be used for soft costs. Actually, sorry, it said 10% of the applied for amount, I believe is what the wording is.
Not to exceed total funding requested. Pre-development expenses, including total not to the total funding requested. So that's vague in that, in the example of PHA where their funding requested is technically $3 million. The funding available, 750. I mean, to read that strictly, you could say that PHA could use $300,000 of CAF funds for their $3 million.
Up to
Funding
300,000. Yeah.
I don't know if that's exactly the intent. Because that would seem to me that that would encourage everyone to make CAF applications in multiples of millions of dollars and then use the balance that is actually awarded for, oh, it's only 10% of what I asked for. So I'm not sure if we want to, it doesn't make sense to say, wait a minute, that's, even though it says what it says, that's not what it says.
Phil,
Yes,
Can I-
ma'am.
do you have the ability, or is staff able there to help you to pull up the staff summary so that everybody can see it on the screen?
Or I think, Rory, are you
I-
about to do that? You have that look on your
I
face.
think that makes this process a lot easier when
I
we're
can do
talking
that.
about documents, because I have documents in multiple places. I'm
Yeah,
trying to keep up
oh no,
with
we're going to
everything.
be hopelessly confused anyway. So but I think this is the paragraph I was referring to.
Yeah, so here is the staff report, down on page 5. And when they say staff recommends, is this the technical committee that included more than just staff, or is this?
When I served on it was definitely, I was not staff. And I made that known during the last meeting, when they keep referring to it as staff.
But so is this the recommendation of
Brenda's
the
on the
committee, or was
post.
it later edited by staff, like with this bit added, really?
I think that's a good question for Ms. Kelly.
I'm here. So what happened was staff reviewed the technical committee's recommendations and then determined if we were in support of that or what we wanted to do. And we determined that we would just forward that recommendation to the city council. However, we did have some concerns with some items, and so we put that in as staff recommendations to city council, which is also typically how council agendas go to city council, that staff's making a recommendation of how to move forward. Did that answer your question?
Yep. Second question, I was about to Google the answer for, but can't find because BHDA nuked their website and everything's gone now. The application deadline for LIHTC is March 15th, is that right? But still that? Or is it April 15th?
I think it's March.
It's March, whatever that date near the middle of the month is.
Right, so we should already know if they submitted an application or not, right? Or, I mean, maybe they didn't tell us, but someone knows, right?
If this is moving forward this way or whatever, I would probably reach out to Sunshine and say what happened and give us an update so we'd be able to be prepared to offer that to city council. So
I think that date was March the 10th.
okay, and I just haven't had an opportunity to reach out and find out where they're at. But yes, Rory, I would do that.
Right, but this is referring to 2023 application and final rankings.
Well, the application is for, or their NOFA response talks about 2023. This recommendation says reallocate it if they're not applying this year, basically.
Right. Is not made or approved by June 30th, 2022, correct? So the question is, did they apply for it in 2022 at all for this?
Yep. So I guess is our plan to make some recommendation, make some other, if they're part of the recommendation, make some other recommendation, assuming that this is already disqualifying them, or if this is the condition we want anyway.
Right. This is
Find
what
out
we
if
ended
they
up,
applied
yeah.
or not, and then revert to whichever like if they applied, we can keep it, or if they didn't, or we can keep it with the condition that they have to win it.
If I got you, if that is not the case, then do we also allocate where it will go in the event that they don't? do we do that now, essentially? All right, well, assuming we've got 175, but it says in the application that they're going for March 2023. So Brenda, do you have further information that they are actually making the application for this project in March of 2022?
I do not, but I'm in the process of sending an email right now. So if I get a response by the time your meeting ends, I will let you know.
Thank you.
I did just ask someone on the board of MACA, and they said they did not apply this year. They think they need evidence of a funding commitment from the city to feel like there's a strong chance of getting it.
Right.
So it sounds like probably didn't have.
I think
Oh,
that
wait.
answers
Oh, we have LIHTC applications received on the VHA website. Pull that up, maybe. Excel First Street Phase 2, Phase 1. No MACA.
Full City, 6th Street.
Yep.
Oh, I see.
And so both CRHA. No.
Yep.
Nothing else. No RST either. Anyway. So we can either accept this condition from the committee and or staff, in which case we should probably exclude them, or consider whether that timeline they're talking about excludes them.
Let's walk through the mechanics of the timeline. So assuming, I mean, this may answer our question here. So I don't see how the timeline works, because what contract are they going to put against? I mean, they can get a funding committee commitment from the city, right? And then what funding, but they're not going to have any notification of it until, June of 2023. So the question is, why are we using this money for that funding commitment when it ain't going to get spent under the, we're not going to have a contract in place to spend a dime of it until next fiscal year either.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point though, the literal reading of 10% of total funding requested says, as long as we give them less than 300,000, they can spend that on this pre-development stuff.
Yeah.
I agree that is a bizarre. I mean, just the idea that you can apply for more than the NOFA amount and magically that means you get to spend all of however much you want on this is a little bit absurd.
How about I move that interpretation and that loophole is on its face absurd and should be excluded. And we shouldn't be making decisions based on that.
Yeah, I can live with that. And I mean, if it makes us feel any better, I think I heard staff saying on Monday, or city manager's office / the consultant saying on Monday that next year's allocations process is planned to line up better with tax credit stuff so that we'll be done before March 15th and they can include it in their application. So this isn't necessarily their last chance to get something for their application, though it also kind of sounds like they're not going to apply if we just give them 175,000 anyway and they want a larger commitment, but it's a little tangential.
Okay. So do you have some sort of, anybody else?
Brenda has her hand. Brenda has her.
Brenda,
has her
yes,
hand
ma'am.
up.
Jump in, please.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interfere in your process, but Rory, I just wanted to point out not to hold the amount of the request against PHA. I had quite a few conversations with Sunshine where he, acknowledged there's only 750. This is our project, this is our need, and we kind of agreed together to go ahead and put in for the full amount so that the city council is also aware of the need if they wanted to do something differently or whatever. So they certainly acknowledge there was only 750 available, and we're trying to weigh, we just apply for the 750 or whatever. So that's kind of how we talk. So please don't hold their full request against them, because that was kind of what we were advising them should not be a problem to just put in the full amount.
Yeah, thank
I think
you.
that's fair.
Thank you, Brenda. I mean, I think that's in parallel to the conversation, though, which is how the thing is worded, which then leads into the use of funds and the 10% number. So, I mean, I think that those are, I'm not holding that against them. I'm just saying that in general, that doesn't make sense as a criteria if it's the application amount, because unless you get 100% of what you've requested, then it's a meaningless, then it's essentially it's a phantom number. It's a planted number. So I mean, whether it's three, I mean, whether if there's 500, if you request 500 and you only get 50,000 by reading these rules strictly, you could use all 50,000 of that on pre-soft costs. So I guess what I'm saying is that pre-development expense thing really should be 10% of the total funding obtained. I don't know. Maybe we might want to have circumstances where we say, actually, what you need the CAF for is pre-development expenses, period. And everything else is paid for. So I don't know how to apply that.
Well, I just want to caution you guys. One thing you have to, in terms of that 10%, remember, it's talking about city money, not the overall cost of the project. It's city money.
Yes, sir. City money requested, not awarded. That's the sticky wicket.
Yeah, so I think my stance is like, I'm not gonna hold the fact that they requested too much, that more than possible against them. But I don't think we should give them credit. Like, I'm not gonna hold it for them either, in the sense of giving them this loophole where you could spend all the money. I mean, I think actually, if you put all that aside anyway,
Right.
Given that they didn't apply this year,
Moot.
they're not gonna apply till next year, which means according to their timeline, the money's not really gonna be spent till 2024. I mean, I guess that the loophole is the only way out of that. And I don't think that loophole makes sense.
Yeah. I'm just complaining that it's fuzzy. Okay. So do we have any conclusions about that you want to, do we want to discuss that further? Do you want to craft a motion? What do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I
think
guess
that-
I'd like to hear if everyone else agrees.
All right, yeah,
Sorry, go
let's,
ahead.
yeah, anybody else on this?
I think that we should do what we're doing right now and take notes of concerns and then circle back. And I think that it's important for, I know we're assuming that everybody has read the NOFA, but does anybody have any questions in regards to it? Some of your questions is relating to that, Lori. Were there any outstanding questions? Because that's what we're applying, and everybody needs to be on the same page in terms of understanding it. So if we're all walking into it with a different understanding, that could affect the outcome, correct? We all need to be speaking the same
Correct, but-
initial language.
Yeah, but I would caution you that our timeline doesn't permit too much circling back at this point.
I'm good. I'm just leaving that leeway open for people who are not speaking up, who may have
Yeah,
that
I
same.
got you. I got you. Yeah.
Okay.
But in theory, we're supposed to have work product to be included by tomorrow noon. So if you could see, if you could see me, you could see the desperate panic at the back of my eye. Anyway,
If I actually do have one kind of clarifying question about the NOFA and how it applies to the scoring worksheet. There's that one question about household equity. And equity is one of those weird words that like has an abstract meaning that we talk about, and then it has like very specific meaning of like home equity, like building up, money in
think
your
they're
house that you
both-
don't owe loans again.
Yeah, they're
And
both used in this.
yeah, and my interpretation of the NOFA was that I was talking about like equity in general, like equitable housing. But this phrase, and I'm thinking that you referenced it earlier, Phil, when you said, this is the question that the two LEAP applications would score differently on, because obviously renters can't build home equity.
Correct.
All homeowners do build home equity. So whether
Yeah,
we're
but-
talking about like equity in the sense of like, we want things to be equitable versus
That's
building home
13.
equity, seems like a pretty big distinction here.
Yeah, that's question
And-
13, right?
11.
Look at 13.
Yeah, so I mean, there's that. They're kind of repetitive otherwise, I guess.
That I think is referring to equity and the equitable, and in the term of, in the sense of equity in terms of fairness, and then equity in terms of ownership in 11. So I think that equity issue of the fairness application is the 13 question.
So
And
did
it-
everyone else interpret 11 as meaning home equity? For the other three of you?
Can you zoom in that a little bit closer?
Yep, I think.
Rory, I agreed with you on number 11.
That it is home equity?
Hmm.
Okay, that was not my read, to be honest.
No,
Oh,
it's
No,
my
I mean,
read of-
especially in regards to like the LEAP projects and yeah.
in terms of providing equal opportunity to save, in terms of in adding items to the home that will save on electric bills or water bills and things like that. That's how I see
Yeah, well, that's on
it.
the, I
Shaking your
guess,
head, Lori.
yeah, I guess on the ownership side, on the other hand, the equity is the asset you're putting in there has value, right? And then presumably your ability to accumulate assets is better because you're paying less in electric. So, but I think the term household equity, I read that clearly as meaning asset accumulation. And equity in
So-
13, to use the LEAP, for example, if you're in an owner occupied operation and you are putting something in that house that becomes part of the house that increases its value, both in the additive sense and in the collective. I now have an energy efficient home as opposed to a leaky sieve. That is building equity in a sense. The house is worth more.
So I mean, I definitely agree that if you interpret this as home equity, that's what that means. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, to me, then what this question becomes is it's 3% or 3 points for projects that are for home ownership and 0 points for projects that are for renters. And that's just what the question is. Because, if renters save money, they're still building assets in the fact that they're saving money that they would have paid to Dominion or the gas company. But they would still get 0 points on this because it's not home equity. Does that make sense?
Yes, and
And I didn't
thought,
see it,
yeah.
so I didn't see it as home equity. I think you saw it the way I saw it in the beginning, Roy. Sorry.
So, and I think that there are, and not to get hung up too deeply on the exact scoring numbers. I find that these scoring things are useful in that they force you to look at pieces of it, right? And then, oh, right, budget. Does this thing have a budget? What does the budget look like? As opposed to sort of being arbitrary there. And there may be additives, these sort of either or questions sort of give you the opportunity to bounce back, but well, answer one of these. This is about, and I don't know, but
That's why I
tended
think
to
you
view-
need
yeah.
to not focus as much as highly on the points and start to form more of a narrative around what they're requesting, and then go from there and tie that back to the NOFA.
Yeah. And just to finish my thought, I viewed household equity as having something to do with asset and equity in 13 having to do with fairness. And I just sort of divided them in that general category in my head. Fairness of implementation in the community in 13 and 11 in the benefit to the individual household. That's how I made the distinction, I think, not strictly homeowner equity.
So in that sense, a renter saving money on utilities and putting it in their bank account also counts as equity?
Yeah. You see that ringing endorsement? So I didn't say I had this sharpened to a razor point, though. Yeah, I guess.
I mean, I guess in a general sense, I agree with the point about thinking about the scoring as a much more of a guide and not literally, because I found it pretty difficult and frustrating to score a lot of the stuff. Things being like absolute versus like, you know, a sliding scale. I didn't feel like I came out of this with scores that made sense, or that, so maybe it is best to just talk about stuff.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think the scoring model is good to note things that are entirely absent, like, oh, that isn't addressed at all, that sort of thing. And you just don't know. But anyway, I think we've sort of gone a little astray here to circle back to the MACA PHA thing. Did we land on anything on this? Because I think that the condition, I think that the condition that if they haven't got, they're not going to apply for that, they're not getting it, therefore the 175 needs to be reallocated. We know that.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I hate to do it, but I guess make a motion that MACA's application isn't eligible for funding, given that they won't be able to apply for tax credits till next year. And so they won't be able to spend the money in the period required.
And that there will be funding available in the interim in the next round.
Yep.
Where it actually will apply and definitely be in that box. And then that language will make perfect sense if the decisions are made in January, February of next year, they apply in March, and then by the summer we will know. Yes, so I second your motion. Is there any discussion of that? Anybody want to disagree with me? Anyone want to
I'm not
argue that?
disagreeing. A point of clarity, this is due to the application and the requirement that it be spent within a certain time period, correct?
That
Yep.
is one. Number two is that staff, and we do this in past years, put the standard caveat is they don't get the LIHTC, we're going to do something else with the money. Well, they're not going to get the LIHTC this year, so let's go ahead and do something else with the money. Okay, any further discussion of that? Okay, to restate Rory's motion, because of the timing, because of the LIHTC, because of the additional bite at the apple next year, we're moving, the motion is to eliminate PHA from consideration. Is that right, Rory?
Yeah.
Okay, and I seconded that. Is there any further discussion about that? All right, let's see, all in favor, I guess let's just go ahead and do some raising of hands. All right. What else we have here? And Russell, you there? And then,
I'm here. My hand is raised. I'm just, yeah, slow to the, oh, here we go.
right. There we go. Okay. Thank you. Joy, any opposed to that? Okay. No oppositions. Okay, so PHA is out because of the timing. Okay. So then, is there another we want to have a general conversation about? It makes sense to go next, and I'm going to unraise my hand while I tell it. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about LEAP.
All right, let's talk about LEAP. So,
Can we review the recommendation from the technology team and then go from there?
let's do that. Let's see where, because we're really in a position of having to sort of play off of that. So, so their recommendation was final page there. So for the owner occupied, we did not have a recommendation from council on that. So, I think that the owner occupied, to look at the owner occupied piece, it is sort of the way I read it, it inevitably pushes us towards higher income levels based on their population, which drives a portion of it.
I mean, as I recall in the applications, they said the same levels of, or at least they were planning on the same levels of income, which doesn't necessarily mean that totally makes sense. But
yeah, they were steering towards the the 125, 100 of it is 60 and below, right? My confusion, I think, a little bit on that was a lack of clarity on, it's kind of hard to put a number on the affordability limit, right? Because there really isn't an affordability period in the owner occupied one.
I think in both cases, there was a lien on the deed for projects over $5,000.
But we have no sense of that as to which one is which, and we don't have a sense of the length of affordability for that either. Whereas, and I think they make a persuasive argument, I'm going to contrast it to the rental one and not, and I don't want to confuse the issue, but if you can lay that side by side with the rental one, the current and future rentor, right, will benefit from the improved energy efficiency and the lower utility. I would say that they were also pointing towards landlords who were themselves moderate income. And I was a little confused by that, in that if you're going to qualify people on that, they deliberately say we're looking at non-corporate landlords who qualify on income. And the question I have about that, and that's on the rental side as contrast to the owner, so I may be conflating them. But if you own several rental properties, it is not hard to quote qualify as low income. All you need is a little loss carry forward from something, and all of a sudden you're not filing on anything. Thank you depreciation, thank you mortgage interest, thank you loss carry forward. So I'm not sure how they get there, but.
And when you say corporate, trying to steer away from corporate landlords, if you own 4 or more properties, you're in a whole different bracket anyway,
Yeah, they don't say
in
that
terms
either.
of
They say that,
landlords.
yeah, but they assert as individual small, individual landlords who are moderate income, that they're going to income qualify, which means that they're going to look at somebody's tax return. And if they do that, it's not hard. Somebody owned 3 rental properties, have $150,000 a year salary, and still, hey, my taxable income was $8,000, whatever. So, I'm not sure about the
Yeah.
qualification process there.
I mean, owners of multiple, and it does say corporate owners of multiple rental properties. It's a little unclear to me whether they mean, MSC and Woodard, or if they mean anyone who owns 4 or more. In which case, maybe the only people eligible are like people in duplex renting out the other half, or like an owner renting out an ADU, or maybe you own 1 or 2. I think that's a good point that, anyone running a business like a rental property can just have some losses 1 year and then say their income's low.
Right, and they make the distinction between individual owners, but if they're going to income qualify them, and do they actually say in the same manner? It was pretty close. It's pretty close. I can tell I'm old because I actually murdered trees for all of this. They actually discuss it as, see if I can. Works. LEAP will target program to landlords who themselves are lower income qualified. We will not engage large corporate owners of multiple rental properties. We will utilize the housing assisting programs policies associated with assisting renters, which ensures the landlord cannot raise rent on the tenant until the deferred loan's term is complete, 1 to 3 years, depending on the amount of the benefit received. So that defines a sort of an affordability period of 3 years. But I still don't understand what they mean. Or I don't know if that's a metric that works.
It's interesting that that's the only part of the application that discusses a loan, a deferred loan. I think if this is really like recouping the costs, and then cycling it back into more energy improvements 1 to 3 years later, that is a pretty tangible benefit that isn't really captured in our scoring rubric. It doesn't talk about it anywhere else. So talked about the lien on the deed.
Yeah, but no discussion of what those are.
Yeah. Unless that just means the deferred loan time means until the amount is amortized based on the housing affordability policy.
Clear on that too. Anybody else have any insight on that?
Trying to look through my notes. I have so many things down here.
All right, I'm going grad school on this. Stacks on the floor. Okay. There we go. All right. So. Yeah, I don't have a grasp on that either. So
And also, the city's housing affordability policy is in capitals. Like do you guys know what document this is referring to? Because Did not find anything with that name.
No. We got AHP.
Like the plan?
So, are they referring to Housing Policy 1?
We're talking about the LEAP right here and how it is tied back to the new affordable housing policy? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I mean, the affordable housing plan doesn't really talk about like really specific stuff, like when liens on the deed are required, does it?
Right.
Um,
No,
neither. As far as I
that
know,
may
this
be
Housing
his
Policy 1.
interpretation of what benefit this application.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. I agree with you. I don't know what it means. I don't know what they're referring to. And I guess I was making an editorial assumption that it was affordable housing plan for when a lien on the deed is not required. I think
Ms.
that's
Kelly,
housing
do you
policy
know?
1. I think that's housing policy 1 they're actually referring to.
I'm not familiar with that, and I helped work on that policy.
No, policy 1 is the existing trailing housing policy that was revamped in 2014.
And actually, the affordable housing plan does talk about liens against deeds in a little sidebar on page 147. But it says if the value of the repairs exceeds $20,000. So,
All right.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's not super critical to the point, but
Okay. So there are criteria in this one, and this went along another, do the providing proposed allocations preserve and provide affordable housing units under 80%. Yes, all of them did that. Does it, do they demonstrate a need for the project? Yes, all of them do that. And those sorts of things. And do they fully describe how it attracts equity and the populations receiving benefit? I mean, I think most of them did that very well too. So I think part of what goes into this calculus is absent the CAF, what happens?
Are you speaking for both the homeowner and the renter? Or you just,
Yeah. I mean, or enlarge them in general. I mean, it's sort of a consideration for all of them, but let's look at LEAP as an example. If there is no CAF money for either one of these, what happens to this program?
is it going to truly hit our targeted demographics for the homeowner part of it?
Right. Or is it gonna work at all?
I can see the value for the renter side of it and the units. I can definitely see that side. I have more questions around the homeowner side of it. And helping for the targeted demographics and the income part of it.
I think with this program, or with these two programs, and probably AHIP, more than any of the others, they can be scaled up and down. Like there's 26 things to do. So if you have half the funding, you probably do roughly 13, maybe a little less given there's fixed costs. Though they say their overhead percentage. Obviously they have outside funding from Dominion, so that stuff has to happen anyway. So, to the extent that we reduce the amount of funding given, I would say that presumably the effect is fewer units get retrofits.
Right, and then we look into our own leverage numbers too, because if we're supposed to measure this on our ability to leverage, you know, I mean, that to be a consideration, right? So okay. So what level of, right, so what, as Lisa, you said you had further questions, you know, or further thoughts on the owner occupied that were, I don't know, speed bumps, concerns, considerations. Give me a sense of what those are. Can you share those?
I was trying to find my notes. I can speak in general. I just felt that I would see more if we had to consider where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck. It would be in terms of the renter side. I see a lot more questions about how we can control the some of the concerns that we have on the seller side, the owner side.
Right.
In terms of income restrictions, and then we have the issue of qualifying the word equity. Is it for fairness, more fairness opportunity, considering the demographics and where we want to have the biggest bang for our buck? Where do you think it's going to be? Is it going to be more on the renter side? Who's most likely to be in need? Is it going to be the renter or is it going to be the homeowner? Who's going to have the biggest benefit from our funding? And I see it more on the renter side. I see that homeowners are already, and I'm for homeowners, but homeowners are going to have the possibility of already having equity and other resources versus what renters could have access to. So I think that there's a greater need on the renter side. And there are still some questionable things on the
That isn't clear. Yeah.
unresolved issues that we might, I mean, I don't think we have the time to go back to them and ask for greater detail on the owner side, the owner occupied side.
Yeah. Okay.
Considering all of that as a narrative, that's where I link. Who's
Right.
going to benefit the best from these fundings? And I see the renters would. I think that owners are going to have more opportunity to delve into other resources to get their housing better fit for whatever they need to make it more sustainable, more green, whatever. They'll have more resources at their hands.
Right. I think I
Roy,
agree.
'cause I saw your head shaking.
I think I agree with all of that. But just to, because nothing's ever simple. Are we not also creating a moral, and I hate to use this term because it makes me sound like a Wall Street jackass, but are we creating a moral hazard on the rental side where essentially you have a rental property with deferred maintenance and the quote reward to the landlord is, hey, we'll fix it.
So
How's that different than what we currently do with subsidizing housing in other regards? How's that different from what we currently do?
Well, I mean, in the Section 8 world, the landlord's got to maintain the property.
So
LEAP is
I
not
don't
the
know if I-
landlord.
I don't know if I buy the moral hazard, which would require that like a landlord is going to let their property fall into disrepair because they know they can find this program. Because there's a lot more landlords than the 20-something slots in this.
Right.
I agree with Ms. Herndon that the biggest need, or that the renters are probably more in need. That they're lower resourced, and probably paying the most as a portion of their income on utilities. I think where I get worried about the renter side, I know we have that like 1 to 3 year requirement there, but for the landlord, if that rental property turns over in a couple of years, if previously they couldn't rent it for as much because you have to pay an extra $200 in utilities versus, a normal house where you're paying, $75, they could lower the rent, or raise the rent to compensate. Of course, the problem with that is no one knows what the utilities really are until you move into a place. So I don't know how much actual, pricing power they have there. But that would, I guess, be my concern, that you make the improvement to the rental property, and so they get to raise the rent in the medium term after the requirement expires. Whereas the homeowner would keep it, presumably the homeowner staying for a while, and so they would be keeping those benefits over the long term.
But I mean, that's with any rental. I mean, we don't control that. That's part of your property rights. You can do whatever you want to do with your property. But I'd rather have a home that is more energy efficient for a renter who's already struggling versus a homeowner, if I had to select and to put a priority on it.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. And I mean, I would like to see, to your point earlier, that homeowner probably has a bunch of home equity that they can leverage as a resource for this. And so I would like to see a homeowner program like this be recouping those funds, either, maybe with a lien that isn't called in until the sale. So it just takes a chunk of home equity without costing that low income homeowner, money, cash flow in the near term. But I think if you're giving grants like this, I think you're right that renters are probably the better target.
Okay, so city staff report recommends 50 for the renter occupied program. It sounds to me like we are in general agreement of the renter over the owner. And they're calling that tier 3, but I think our whole tiering arrangement, if we've removed Piedmont Housing Alliance from the equation here, has shifted as well. So there's that. Okay. So my sense is that the consensus here is that we're generally in agreement with the city of the staff report, preferencing the renter over, but I guess we're moving dollar numbers around. So for now, we just leave that as a placeholder, right?
I'm fine with that.
Let's figure out what we're spending money on elsewhere, and then before we chop it up. Okay. Good enough. So everyone okay with saying, all right, for now, we're at the renters at 50K as a placeholder, not a real number until we get to the end of this. And we can move on to CRHA. That makes sense?
So I know the list has CRHA next, but do you guys think it maybe makes sense to talk about AHIP next, since it's the most similar program to that one?
Yes, I do.
I'm in agreement.
Excellent.
And then maybe Arc of the Piedmont after that, actually.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense to me.
Excuse me, can you repeat what you were saying about CRHA? I was multitasking.
We're just going to talk about them after AHIP and Arc of the Piedmont, since those are closer in what they're doing to the LEAP ones.
Say that again, Lori?
We're just going to talk about them, I guess, last, after the next two for AHIP and the other one.
All right.
We're just ordering things as to order a battle. All right, so you want to talk about AHIP?
Okay.
So AHIP's request was for AHIP made a request for 250. They were all right. They are, most of it is for 60 and below. Mhm.
So I think my biggest concern with this program, and I think they did a pretty good job of demonstrating the need for it. Like, I mean, in an anecdotal sense, at least that story was very compelling. My biggest concern, if you look at their budget, they're spending $200,000 of this budget out of 328, 161, including the leverage on the actual construction and delivery of the improvements, right? Which works out to a 39% overhead that's just going to staff. Compared, for example, to LEAP 25% overhead. And that really gave me pause here. I just don't know how you can justify. I mean, I get that they have paperwork to do, but that's a lot of money not going to the people we want to get improvements to.
Do they not get a certain amount of discounted and or de facto free labor that is staff wise that isn't accounted for here though?
Who?
From their volunteer efforts, from their partnering with contractors, from these other things that are not their employees, but there are costs that there are benefits that come out of this that are not reflected in the budget. What I'm saying is that if we're talking about the people cost as a percentage, yes, but if the overall cost is lower because the number of people who are providing the implementation is larger, they're not paid staff. There's a certain amount of volunteer at AHIP. There's a certain amount of discounted contractors doing things at cost and other things. I don't know if we can account for that. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, is it really 39% or is it less?
So in that case, do you mean that they're counting those volunteers as costs and they are essentially they'll pocket that money because we're paying for them, but they
no, I'm saying exactly the opposite. I'm saying exactly the opposite. That if you have someone whose value is, let's say, $50 an hour and they give you 10 hours of their time, you didn't have to go pay them $1,000.
So I think that speaks more to Rory's point
No, it's the
versus not
opposite
speaking
direction.
to him. It speaks more to his point.
No, what I'm saying is that none of that is reflected. I could be 100% wrong.
Oh, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I understand.
None of that is reflected in the staff number. I mean, if you say, well, this X dollars covers the staff, but if in fact that X dollars, there are actually many more people involved in it.
Well,
that would be free labor.
Scarier,
that would be free
right?
labor. So that would be even less.
Right.
Because of their volunteers.
You're spending 39% on staff and you're getting a bunch of free labor. So even less, if you counted the free labor, even less of the money is going to the actual construction. That seems.
No, what I'm saying is you ought to have some sort of line item to reflect that, right? I mean,
oh, definitely.
X amount of donated time, call it donated time, that would make that 39% number look a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Yeah.
This form definitely needs to be tweaked. Definitely needs some improvements and to have some questions on there so that we can have a more detailed explanation about where the fundings are actually going. More itemized questions, I think, in regards to that.
So
hard
what you're
costs,
saying,
labor, subcontractors, materials, soft costs, per third-party inspections, recording fees, rentals, fuel disposing. So
are you saying all the free labor is in this line item of the actual providing the stuff? And so that makes the overhead look larger. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Maybe.
I'm also saying the 200 grand is not, it's actually probably a much larger number when you get done with it. Yes, ma'am.
Can you remind me of the technology committee's recommendation on this?
100.
Okay.
And then, I mean, I think in the, like, bringing it back to what we were talking about with LEAP, I think all those same things about homeowners, helping homeowners versus renters kind of apply. That said, well,
Yeah, but having said that,
Um,
we place a whole lot, the city places a whole lot of liens on AHIP stuff and it comes trickling back in over the years. That's just how it works. And you can see in almost every council agenda, reallocating $9,211 that has come in from, okay, from some AHIP deal that we did 11 years ago or something. So,
I'm going to stand by my recommendation with the Technology Committee in terms of the amount to award.
um, I think,
Because Rory, we did have some of the similar concerns that you addressed.
but what I would suggest that in terms of, instead of saying we're going to stick with the amount of the award for now, say that it's an okay placeholder because we do have money that we're shifting around, right? So with that
Agreed.
modification, do you want to make that a motion?
I motion that we, with considering the staff, I don't want to say that, no, considering the Technology Committee's recommendation to City Council, I'm in agreement with holding that dollar amount as we move forward.
Any discussion of that? Well, I'll second that. Any discussion? Any debate? Any disagreement? Any raised hands? Anyone yelling? All right. Anyone opposed to that? Please raise a hand. Seeing none, we're going to move on. Okay. That brings us to our friends at, you wanted to take a look at ARC.
yeah, so this one was interesting because it's like one of the many things that AHIP or LEAP would do almost. Certainly the population served is the most in need, and it's preserving the affordability of that. I think my biggest concern, if any, I mean, the application was a little sparse, and I'm not totally clear on what happens if it doesn't happen. But the thing that gives me pause is paying for a new gas furnace rather than, say, a heat pump retrofit via LEAP or whatever, or by whoever, that could reduce costs in the long run, not use fossil fuels, et cetera. I'd almost rather give them more money for that. But I am a little scared to give them nothing.
Yeah.
Wasn't the recommendation, what was the recommendation before I try to recite it
Nothing.
for that furnace? What was the recommendation?
0.
Because if I'm remembering correctly, and Brenda chime in, we were going to refer them to another resource, similar to what you were saying, for a similar to a LEAP or an AHAB to fulfill that need. We
Yeah, I
felt
think-
that the funding could be better spent and have greater impact somewhere else.
Yeah, my impression on reading this is that, yeah, they need this furnace, and they should get it, and the money's there somewhere, but it shouldn't be coming from the CAF fund. That just doesn't seem to be the right place for it. It is more like sidling up to AHIP or LEAP and trying to work something through those channels. And I think that was my impression on looking at it. I mean, not that it's not absolutely necessary and not that they don't absolutely need it. And fortunately, we're heading into April, so we got a little breathing room on the furnace, but I might feel differently if we were coming up on Thanksgiving about sort of getting this organized, but we're not. So
I think that's a good point. I think maybe when we start thinking about final allocations, we bump up AHIP a little bit.
Go
AHIP
talk to
renter
him.
and give them kind of a poke and say, hey, go talk to these guys. Does that make sense to you all?
Something like
Brenda,
that.
can you speak to, are you still here, Brenda?
Yes, I am.
Can you speak a little to that? Because I remember us having this discussion.
Yes, the technical committee had a discussion that possibly CDBG grants could be used, or our sustainability folks would look at their programs and coordinate with some of our providers that already do this type of work.
Great. I think that makes sense.
I think
As long
we
as
have
we're
a
not leaving
consensus
the
that,
goal.
yes, so consensus is that this is not a CAF allocation. This is not a CAF allocation neighborhood. This belongs somewhere else. All right. So what does that bring us to? Habitat? Is that where we're at now?
Unless Joy wanted to put something in front of it. She seemed to want to make sure.
No,
she
I
had-
just wanted it, I wanted to make sure I was paying attention. I was double tasking. I'm sorry.
Well, I admire that you're capable of doing that at all. I'm a dude. I'm miserable at it.
So this was really two applications, right? Do we want to think about them separately?
It appears that the staff report reflects that.
Can we go over that? And I think that's a good starting point, and then we can form any additional comments and see how it works out for us.
I think it makes sense. So they're looking for down payment assistant grants, which they estimated average of 15,000 for 5 homeowners. If we take that as a standalone, there we go. It's all below 30. So this is their deep subsidy, right? This is everybody who is that 15,000 comes at the end of their own first, the forgivable seconds, and all of that. Right. Gotcha.
And I think if I'm remembering correctly, there was a question that was sent back via email to Dan for some clarity.
Right, and that was reflecting to how many proffered affordable units were in the development. That wasn't about the.
Yeah, also, actually, sorry, I like to point out there, his response was not actually I mean, it was technically incorrect, but 80% AMI is not what the proffer was. The proffer was for 8 units, 8 homes at 60% AMI. I believe that's 8. It was, I believe, 50. Yeah, so 8 at up to 60% AMI. And so that would be required. You know, it was kind of written with the idea that Habitat would be the ones to do it, which would bring it down further. But, you know, if Habitat doesn't do it, the landowner can't get a certificate of occupancy without providing these 60% AMI homes.
But what was the question but that was the question. I'm not sure I completely understand the intent of the question. However, just because of a unit of profit doesn't mean it's going to be affordable to lower income. CAF funding allows us to lower the AMI below the standard 80% required for affordable housing. So he's not referring to this in particular. I think he was talking
That's
about
why I said
something
it's technically
as a local
correct, yeah.
match, blah, blah, blah. So,
Yeah, he's implying that that was 80% here, but it's not.
I don't think that's what he was
but-
saying, but I think he was discussing it.
Sure.
I don't think he was trying to make that argument.
Well,
I'm
that's
trying to
why
ex-
we wanted some clarity on some things.
And as he says, I don't think I understand the question completely either. They're building 50, so these 8s are part of that. We're purchasing 4 lots using previous sites because it's possible to deduce that 4 of the 12 that are part of this request are proffered, and 8 are in addition to the proffer. So I guess he's saying is this funding request is 8 units that are on top of the proffer for this funding request is on top of the proffer.
Yeah, so there will be 16 total and 8 were proffered. And he's saying they already have funding for 4. I'm a little confused what he means by, well, he's saying lots. Each of these are counted as lots. But as I recall during those discussions, they were planned to be stacked townhomes, like, 2/2s, which I would think means 1 lot is 2 units, but I guess that's not the case.
I'm trying to move the document on the screen.
Sorry.
Project ready is the 12 remaining units need city funding to close the back gap in the cut budget. But I think I think that was a question about the number of, does this add to the affordable units from that proffer? And his answer was yes, it does. But 4 of them, this adds 8 to their number, I think is what he's saying.
Yeah, and it brings it down from 60% to
Whatever.
that's average of 34%. So
Right.
that's meaningful, though we unfortunately don't have a good way of quantifying it because I don't think we know what the price a house at 60% AMI would have to be, right? Because we haven't done that in possibly ever.
Right. But I think he's really, it is hard to quantify, but he's just talking about getting dirt. And frankly, I think projecting any construction cost on anything these days is a fool's errand, but here we are.
I think,
Okay.
Roy, you're expressing some of the concerns or some of the questions that I had. How are we going to ensure that this is going to address the lower wealth communities?
I think if there's an answer to that is that Habitat points as much as they can to sub 30. They're saying that's what they're going to point to when these things get built. And we have enormous, and we have, we have an abundant history to back that up. That's what they do. So,
Well, average of 34, not quite sub 30, but
yeah, that's what they shove towards is what I'm saying. And as they say in their presentation that they're pushing even harder in that direction under their new Equity 2022 plan, that it tends to be pushing that farther and farther down with deeper subsidy, the way they're scoring things.
And that's how I'm understanding this, that they're not guaranteeing the price, which nobody can guarantee the price of the homes. But with more subsidies, they can help to reduce and make the home more affordable, not saying it's going to address the larger community that we want to impact the most, which is the lower wealth communities. But with additional funding, they can help to reduce that and make it even more affordable for more individuals. I don't think that we have the ability to speak as specifically how many we're going to address and ensuring that a specific price point. I just want to make
Right.
that clarity.
But on the other hand, Habitat says they're going to build 16 homes, right? they've got the money for 4. They need the money for the additional 12. And if they're building 16 habitat homes or 12 habitat homes with the money, it's going to fit the habitat model. They're not doing it at 80. They're doing it at their usual. That's what they do.
Yeah, that was my impression, that this would get it down to those. And while, what this pays for is the land, these 2 state sources plus private fundraising plus the mortgages, get them the construction, right? Actually, we're not even quite getting to the land, but I mean, I think they're saying it would be fully funded if we help them buy these lots. And then that would be at 35% AMI, which is again implied. In the past, it's been that low.
I mean, that's just what they do. I mean, they're not building 80, they're not building 80% homes. That's not what they do. Okay, so I think we sort of jumped from the down payment assistance to this project. Staff report, the report to council puts us at 75 for the Habitat for Humanity of Greater Charlottesville's down payment assistance. That is clearly pointed at the lowest folks. It's an equity builder. It's, Habitat is going to have its arms around all of the risk on that entirely. So I don't disagree with that. However, since we've found more funding here, perhaps we want to look at not zeroing their other program at this point, particularly since it's tier 1 stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is a factor to consider, but they did just get 5 million and change yesterday from Bezos, which I don't know if that reduces their need for this or goes right into more down payment assistance. I don't know if there are more opportunities for $15,000 down payments that they could just scale that up to.
Well, in which case, I mean, maybe, but then I guess we leverage some of it.
Phil, I'm okay with where we have it at and putting a question mark and leaving it for additional funding. But to consider the next batch of applications, the next group of applications, coming back to having a question mark whether to fund additionally. Because we may
Move
find
through the rest of it and then go back and see what money
Yeah,
we've got lying
yeah.
around. Yeah, that's what I meant. I mean, so I think we're on the same page, that we leave it where it's at now, get through CRHA and then circle back around and see what we're doing.
Yeah.
I agree.
And right now, sorry, the down payment, the request was 75 and the recommendation was 75. So there's no shortfall in the down payment assistance. The only question is
Right.
whether to add the Flint Hill stuff. Okay.
All right. So that brings us to CRHA.
Might be too many tabs.
Uh, Somebody needs to run an optimizer. All right. All right, here we go. So
Can I ask, like I always do, what was the recommendation from the technology team? Committee?
So if I had like a general, and I'm perfectly willing to be shot down on this, but what we have here is a $30 million project from which they're asking for which we're providing at this point at 350, basically a little over 1%. And not to be snarky, but although that's pretty highly leveraged use of the dollars, what 1%? Is there nowhere else this can come from, considering our limited CAF funds and the commitments that the city has made? And I just asked that as a general question, because they were looking for 2%. The city offered them 1% of the cost.
Well, so, I mean, I think one thing to consider is that this CAP application is not the only city subsidy for this project. So there's also this PDC grant. I don't know where that's supposed to, I've never heard of this, but I guess it exists. So the $3 million is 7%. This was gonna be another 1.74%. But of course, this is, leveraging things like LIHTC equity. So, I mean, if your shortfall is a couple percent, I don't know that means that you can just do the project even though you're a bit short, right? Like, you have to get over the hump to make the whole thing happen, I would imagine.
Yeah, I guess the flip side of that, I was thinking was from the point of view of CAF allocations, it's the difference between programs getting funded or not. Period.
I think that's an argument that we could have for every applicant in here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just that, I mean, if you lay this one next to, it's sort of the other side of the coin on our Arc of the Piedmont one, right? Where it's a relatively small amount that we can do, but it doesn't really fit the remit properly. But it 100% solves the issue that they want, right? It's the whole project, it's 100% of the budget, it does it, done. And on this side, I mean, I know very well that these larger developments, you're cobbling it together from 63 different sources, and you've got firm commitments and tentative commitments and letters of intent and half promises and downright lies. And, I mean, you just sort of like try to scoop them all together in some sense. And at the end of the day, you end up with hopefully a pile of money that's sufficient to do it. I'm just asking that at this level of granularity, does this contribution is this the critical pointy end of the spear that they need to make this go? And maybe it is. I'm just saying, but
I think it also raises the question of, like, if we only give them a little less than half the amount they get, can it still go? Does that make it easier for them to backfill the rest of the 400,000, because 400,000 is easier to find than 750? There's a lot of questions there for me.
yeah, I mean, and what's in the CRHA seller note? That's seller financing. Well, if you're in for 4.73, why aren't you in for 5.2?
I think this addresses this addresses a lot of the housing needs, the targeted demographics that we're interested in funding. That would be my main narrative in this. And if we were able to support that, like we've supported all the other applicants, I think let's make their lift a little bit lighter.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either. I mean, I'm not.
They're gonna, how many units are they gonna provide?
Is this 112, 113? Is that what that was?
113.
13, I
No,
think.
no, it's 66, right? I'm getting it confused.
113.
No, NACA was 66. This is
Right, it's
113.
113. Right.
And to the comparison, I think this project is in many ways more appealing than the MAC project. It's hitting a lower cost point per unit at a much lower AMI. Obviously, it's going to be, well, actually, I'm not sure about permanent affordability for. Joey, do you know, is it a mix of like LIHTC ones and true public housing ones?
Those.
What was that question, Lori?
Is it a mix of, are some of the units going to be just LIHTC units? And some
No,
are going to be,
you're gonna have some public housing, some project based, some market rate, and some set aside.
Right, let me take a look at the,
But it's a LIHTC building. But the way we put the deal together, it's gonna be a mix.
okay, that makes sense. I think MACA was also a mix, but I think this mix is at a lower AMI overall.
Yeah, and this is the only way that we could get it deeply affordable so that no one would lose their housing doing the redevelopment.
51, it's a little over 50% of the units are going to be below 50. And then the roughly half of them, or a little less than half, are going to be 50 to 60. So it's 100% under 60, 51, 52% under 50. With about a dozen of them under 30.
I mean, that's leveraging your money. That's leveraging your funding right there. And consider the sustainability factor.
Yeah, and this happens in the near term, right? Like they got a LIHTC award last year. This is just for a supplemental because costs went up. They're talking about breaking ground later in July.
Now,
Yeah, so we had a rehab and we had a new construction, which was the 63 units. And then South First Street, where the original buildings are now, will be phase 2. So this would be like our third project. And all of them is with all of the deals is being put together that way because we truly don't want anyone not to be able to return and can afford it. But, at the same time, we had to make sure that there's some market rate to balance it so that it can be sustainable. And Lisa.
so, Joy, let me stop you right there, Joy.
Yes.
We have to be careful. You're far, I mean, you're kind of blurred here, but you're far not CRHA.
I am far, but I'm part of the residents who are advocated to make sure the deals are, together. So I'm not,
Right.
I'm far, PHAR, Housing Association of Residents.
Right, I got you. I'm just saying, but what I'm saying is that we have to be careful in that not every applicant has a participant here. So
Well, I'm
we have to be
sorry
careful.
that I wear so many hats. I just happen to be a public
I know,
housing resident.
I'm just saying we got to be careful about
Okay,
how we read that data.
okay. Just, okay, I'm a public housing resident and I'm just
I
involved in,
understand.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I fully agree. We just have to be careful in that sense. Okay.
I mean, and Jared, to your point about, well, they're putting up, so much in a seller note, why not do a little bit more? I think that's a weird thing to fault them on, in the sense that I mean, obviously they're a public agency, so it's a little different, but the fact that they're putting up a lot in a seller note seems like a positive to me versus comparing to, the MAC
I apologize.
application.
Yeah, I think I was flipping it exactly on its head, which is from a financing point of view, if you're already in this deal at 4.7, is there a substantive difference in your being in it at 5.3 out of 30 million? And my answer to that is in a lot of sense, no, there isn't. It was a judgment free. It was purely about a percentage in of the overall value. It wasn't about.
Yeah, no, I hear your point about maybe it's easier to get over the hump. But comparing to our other new construction project, forgot the schedule issues that made it ineligible. You're looking at a lot less per unit in that, like, skin in the game sense. And I just happened to look at PHA's 990 yesterday and know they have something like $6 million in cash. Whereas CRHA seems to really be, putting that skin in the game, and we're real close to this deal being done. And we're real close in time to ground being broken, and we're looking at a lower cost per unit than our other, available options, timing aside. To me, it seems like a pretty good bet or a pretty good candidate, just as a new construction deal.
Yeah,
And then
I don't disagree with any of that. To me, it's just leverage works in both ways. From the point of view of feeling positive about, for X dollars, substantially less than $1 million, we push a $30 million project over the edge and get the following upside. On the other hand, there are projects that a large chunk of the deal may live or die or not get done at all, depending on 50 grand or 100 grand shoved their way as part of this process. And I'm just trying to balance that. I'm not in some ways.
That's a good point. I think it's that, new construction in general requires a lot more money, but then you're getting 100 years of those units being provided as a result of it. And that's where, honestly, this whole thing is really frustrating to me, because we don't have a good quantifiable way of really comparing any of these things.
The tools are we're a little bit of some of the tool of this is trying to sort of separate gnat crap from black pepper while wearing boxing gloves. You just don't quite have the sensitive enough tool to figure out how to grab a hold of what you need to grab a hold of.
Bill, I have never heard that type of analogy. You just made that up.
I've used it before. I do not use the term crap, however. But yeah, it's a. So, all right. So let's get a sense here. The staff report recommendation to council is at 350. If we leave that as it is, we have 175 to redistribute. My sense is that no one here wants to reduce it. Is that right?
I can speak up. I'm not in favor of reducing it. I mean, we get a big bang for our buck.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's sustainable. Okay. So yes.
I think my sentiment, I'm not in favor of reducing the South First Street. I think if there's anything here that I think we should consider reducing, it's probably that AHIP amount. And that kind of goes back to, you know, that overhead, with point taken that maybe the overhead is misleadingly high. But, you know, then I noticed in their kind of list of needs, some things seem very extremely urgent, like the one they kind of gave the anecdote for, the home repair emergencies, you know, the energy efficiency upgrades, and some of these critical maintenance stuff seem more along the lines of what LEAP is doing with lower overhead. So maybe we should be funding them for the homeowner side instead. But I would want to give them at least enough to cover however many of these home repair there are. So I wouldn't want to like short them entirely. But you know, some of them are more optional. I don't know. But maybe their overhead goes up even more if we give them a little bit of funding and not all of it.
Well, I mean, I know we're balancing 7 things at once here, literally. So let's sort of circle back to CRHA. Is the sense to leave that recommendation in place as it is at 350?
Was that their original request?
Their original request was for all of it.
Okay, well, I mean, so was somebody, a PHA also wanted all of it too,
Yeah,
right?
they wanted 750, and
We're not gonna penalize them for putting that on.
no, I'm just pointing it out.
So, I mean, I don't know where we came exactly the 350 number. It might just been what was left over, but you know, I could consider bumping it up to 375 to make it an even half of their request. Just because half is a nice round number. I mean, of course, one option would be to give them the whole 175, which would put them up to what, 525, and leave them 225 as a funding gap. But I can see other applications here being worthy of getting some of that 175 too. So I wouldn't necessarily say that's the best option.
I just want to make a quick statement too. This project for me, it's one that, you know, it definitely addresses the need for affordable housing. And I also feel that, you know, it's also targeted to our target population, you know, our community's most vulnerable. And, you know, I think the 750, yeah, obviously we could do that probably, but I would, you know, advocate for at least at a minimum funding that the tier 1, the 30% less than AMI, which would be 375. It's yeah, which would, you know, my opinion would be, you know, our most vulnerable citizens, those that are making far less than our median income for this area. So anyway, my two cents.
Oh, thanks. All right, taking that into account and taking Rory's.
Can I just ask for clarity? Was it Ray? Is it Ray or Joe? I'm sorry, I can't see.
Joe, it's fine.
Joe, you're suggesting you're in favor of bumping up for CHR? Is that what you're saying?
I am, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay,
I
just
think,
wanted clarity.
yeah,
Okay.
I think, yeah, at least that tier 1, that 375, I think for me would be kind of the, you know, the minimum. Yeah.
Okay, so I would
Okay.
suggest that if that's sort of generally how we're leaning to give either, you know, a small bump or a slightly larger than small bump, then what we need to do is figure out what we're doing with the rest. And then, because that might determine the bump. Does that make sense? That if we're going to say, okay, we have 175, assuming that we're going to bump to 375 at a minimum on CRHA, how do we, let's see what our options are for the 150 before, you know, that's what I'm saying. Assuming it doesn't go to CRHA, what do we do with that 150?
Are there other requests where we haven't fulfilled the full tier 1 request?
So the way the staff report lays it out is they moved 350 plus 75 plus 175, so 350, 425. They essentially took 600 of it and called it tier 1 funding.
Which would be appropriate, right? Because that targets the most vulnerable. We want
Right.
to fund that before
Correct.
funding anything else. Okay.
So what they did is they weighted that. So, but to answer your question, Emily, I mean, Habitat arguably, their tier 1 isn't fulfilled, right?
Well, actually, Habitat's
Hold on,
tier
where are we?
one,
South Virginia Electric.
is fulfilled, the way
They
they
wanted their
laid it out
75.
anyway. So I would say, I mean,
Right.
obviously LEAP, we didn't fund the owner occupied at all. So they're funded tier 1 and a bit. If we bump CRHA, that tier 1 is funded. Habitat, I guess the down payment assistance part must have been their tier 1 and the rest is potentially higher. I also feel like maybe these applicants assigned it by tier based on what we said was available. And that's not actually the tier in terms of where the money is going. So it's a little confusing there. I guess AHIP is funded and then PHA is out. So I guess it would be the owner occupied LEAP if we're going by this breakdown of what they actually said it would be, which doesn't quite maybe make sense given that I think everything for CRHA is up to 60%. They just split it up because that's what we said the tiers would be, right? Yeah, they just made it match the tiers.
So
So
again, the question is that does bumping LEAP or Habitat with some of this addition, with the sort of 150-ish that's left, does that get us bang for our buck? And, not necessarily saying tier 1, certainly let's say tier 1 and tier 2. Because I think part of the problem with tier 1 and tier 2 is, and Habitat's a classic example, and so is AHIP. It's tier 1.5, I mean, it's 25 to 38 for most, I mean, that's sort of where they're living. So, so that's the question. So if not CRHA, we've already burdened, we've already sort of burdened LEAP with suggesting that they've got an Arc of the Piedmont and an AHIP connection that that we want to encourage. Do we move some of that to LEAP to allow for that?
yeah, I think that makes sense. Where we currently have, we currently have LEAP at 50,000, which is half of their renter occupied request and none of their owner occupied. I could see if we think renter occupied is definitively better, plus Arc of the Piedmont would fit into renter occupied. I could see bumping that. I could see bumping that all the way up to 100 to fully fill that request. Kind of nudge them and say, do Arc of the Piedmont in there as well, which is probably going to cost probably more like 10 if it's an electrification. And that takes up what, a third of what we have left over?
Well, as a placeholder, if we say we bump to 375 on CRHA, that leaves us with 150 that we just sent to LEAP. That leaves us with 100. So to me, it's, do we want to provide, Habitat's looking to buy lots for their average is 34%. Do we want to give them a little of that? You're concerned about AHIP's, Rory, you're concerned about AHIP's overhead cost. So.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, we already have 100 in AHIP, right? So that puts LEAP and AHIP at the same.
right?
They have AHIP essentially helping homeowners, LEAP helping renters.
That leaves us with 100. Does that, yeah, the question is does that, to me, my inclination towards habitat is that that's a significant gap and chunk of their acquisition. I mean, we actually really moved the ball on their acquisition. That seems to be worthwhile on its face, but I'm
About
willing to-
28%. So it's 100 out of the 360 they need for that, right?
correct.
And this is after giving CRHA the 375.
Correct.
Okay. I'm fine with redistributing it to AHIB. I would much rather see it go towards down payment assistance, but I think we fully funded that request, correct?
Habitat, you mean?
Yes. Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, you said it. You said AHIP.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe because somebody just said that. Sorry. Yes.
So 175 for Habitat is the suggestion.
Right. And then AHIP STET at 100, LEAP at 100. That's 100, 200, 375 plus 375. That's 750. That's where we're at. So I'll go through this again. Piedmont out for timing. CRHA 375. Habitat 75 for down payment assistance, 100 for lot. AHIP 100. LEAP 100.
And we're going to create a better application process next year. Everybody in agreement?
Yes, I will also say that that the application tool and the scoring tool, we have gone from they varied from horrible hack together, we're doing it the best we can, to a good attempt, but nothing has really come to place as a, there's apparently an art to these things and none of us, there's no one who has that skill nearby. I don't know.
I think what's really killing me here is like, I just don't have any, like, I can express a vague, I like this seems like a good program, maybe this deserves more, but I don't have any like reason to say, oh, 25% of this remaining should go to, X, right? Like versus the other thing. It's just, it seems very subjective judgment, and I wish I had metrics. But here's a spreadsheet. Sorry. So what did we say for the remaining 175?
Remaining 175, Habitat gets 100 of it for a total of 175.
And then we
LEAP.
have 75 left.
Then LEAP gets 50 of it, so there go to 100.
Mhm.
CRHA goes to 375.
And then we have 75 left.
No, we don't.
What did I miss?
It was LEAP and
Habitat has
AHIB.
175 total. I
So
can't see.
of the
Hold on a second. I got
175,
some-
25 went to CRHA, 50 went to LEAP, 25 went to Habitat.
100 went to Habitat.
Oh, so Habitat's at 175 now.
Correct.
And that gets us to a final amount of 750. Okay. So this is our recommendation here.
Correct.
And that was mostly due to taking Piedmont out, correct?
Yeah, we just redistributed Piedmont's
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
And, yeah, we redistributed Piedmont's money. Nobody lost money, and AHIP stayed the same. Everybody else get a little more. Okay, so first of all, are we all in agreement on this as our recommendation? Is there anyone who disagrees and wishes to discuss their disagreement further? How about that?
I mean, maybe my one sticking point is I see that 100 is a decent chunk of Habitat's acquisition cost, kind of forces them to get at least to the rest of that extra 4 units. So that would, they have to put it in 20. In terms of the but-for of whether it would all, not happen if we didn't do it. I mean, again, they got $5.5 million yesterday, whereas these other folks did not. So, I mean, maybe they, obviously we don't have any visibility into what their plans for that are. But it seems plausible that they could come up with 360 grand for this out of that. Whereas other people are just, particularly LEAP and AHIP, are just going to not do those potential retrofits. Does that make sense? Is that something we should consider? Or are we assuming that Habitat will find other good uses for that money that are,
I know
maybe
nothing
better?
about that. I know nothing about that acquisition.
I think that is a fair question because it's the same question that was brought up about CRHA, correct?
Right.
It's a fair question, and it's a fair consideration. But then again, that puts us back to where we're going to allocate.
Well, the distinction with CRHA is the CRHA is telling us what they're doing with their money. Whereas with Habitat, all we really know, right, is that we've got this inbound funds. Do we know what it's bound to? I mean, all of this could be south.
They're unrestricted
Is there
funds, but I know.
I mean, it's not like they're not going to spend every dime of it. They couldn't spend every dime of 5 million down at.
I understand Rory's point, and I think it's a valid point.
I do too. I mean,
Of course, it seems a little weird to punish them for getting a bunch of private donations.
correct.
But
But like you said, who is it going to cut out? Who is not now going to be as available to move forward with their projects? I can't answer
yeah,
that.
so I mean, in terms of where we could put it, in terms of the request at least, what's unfunded here, the entire LEAP homeowner program's unfunded. And then I think AHIP has a chunk of unfunded. And of course, CRHA is missing a bunch.
If I had one more day,
Are we not able to ask? I mean, we're doing this, having this sent out by tomorrow at 12 noon. Is that correct? Or am I wrong?
yes.
So we would have time to ask. I mean, we could plug in some
Well,
scenarios. I don't
the
know.
question is, I would need very specific orders, which would say, okay, Phil, ask Habitat, and if they answer A, B, or C, we are doing D. If they answer F, G, or H, we're doing Q. Yes, Brenda.
And if I'm Habitat, I'm certainly going to say, well, there's plenty of
The
places
money.
I can put that money productively,
Yeah.
like Southwood and all this other stuff. Plus, they're still going to have to come up with the 260 to finish that up, given this allocation. So I don't know that asking really gets us anywhere because we've already put all our cards on the table in this public meeting.
Right.
Said how they get the money.
How are they going to answer the question? Brenda, yes, ma'am.
Another alternative is if you wanted additional time, I think you could reach up to my higher officials and ask that the agenda item be pushed off another meeting if you want to reconsider further. I don't think the, April 4th agenda is cut in stone right now if you needed additional time. We were trying to move it as quickly as possible based on the HACs repeated request to get that money out as soon as possible. So that's
Right.
where that timeline came from.
So
Is anybody going to be negatively impacted? I mean, that would be my biggest concern, is somebody waiting for this money that they, on a project that they're just gonna go out and start digging once they get it.
I mean, I think my impression from the application is that LEAP and AHIP have things lined up, though they're doesn't necessarily mean those things won't be done. You know, they might be done a month later, or they might be done with other funds. CRHA obviously doesn't need the money till the LIHTC award comes through in a few months. I don't know what Habitat was planning on their down payment assistance, but again, I don't really know if we can get that much more useful information just by waiting and asking questions, given
Yeah,
I assume everyone's going to answer.
I would tend to agree. I would think to me, either, you know, Habitat has a zoned, ready to go project going there, right? They've got the agreement to buy it. So if we want to say they're going to move forward with that now, fine. And that seems to fit, you know, they tend to hit towards the deepest, most highest subsidy. So that, to the extent that I would sort of be inclined to allocate it. Otherwise, I would be, you know, I don't know where else to assign it other than to sort of, yeah, I mean, my you know, to not allocate 100 grand of it. I mean, and do some and give another round, just split it up against 5 people evenly. I mean, I think that Habitat has a definitive plan for it. I think that you, Rory, have concerns about increasing AHIPs without more budgetary information. The owner occupied thing for LEAP has got a couple of us sort of squinting. So if not there, where?
I mean,
Go ahead, Rory.
I was just going to say, I would say there's 2 places you could put it, and it's either AHIP or owner occupied, where I think when we were weighing renter versus owner occupied, renter wins. It doesn't necessarily mean the owner occupied is, you know, bad, and there's some innate benefits to energy efficiency, of, you know, household saving money, of being better for the environment, that are also nice things out of that owner occupied, even if they aren't necessarily the greatest need, but we met that need. I don't know. Everyone disappear on me?
No, I'm here. I just all
Alex,
right,
were
well,
you gonna say something?
let's just poll ourselves really quick because we're talking ourselves in circles. All right. Emily, 100 to LEAP, 100 to AHIP, 75 to Habitat, 375 to CRHA. What do you want to do with the next 100? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it, the remainder, the balance going to Habitat.
Rory, same question.
I would probably lean towards LEAP owner occupied.
All of it. Okay. S. Lisa.
So Rory, you would be funding them 225?
For total between them, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're at 100 and then we'd add 100. They'd be at 200 even.
Okay, because right now I see 125, so in red at the bottom of the screen. So if we're not giving CRHA any additional fund, then I would say go add it towards Habitat.
Yeah, I guess that is another option, just bump CRHA up another 100. Still leaves them short though.
All right. So Rory, you're at 50-50 on that, either in terms of dollars or your decision tree. But I
I
think
I
we've
don't have
got,
strong opinions in any of those directions, since I don't have any metrics to make that decision by.
Yeah, I feel like I
You
could
don't
be
need
convinced
metrics
in
at this
any,
point.
so, all right, so from that poll, we've got one pointing to LEAP and then 3 of us pointing to Habitat.
If we're not gonna fund CRHA, I don't know why it's hard for me to say that word, but it is. So if that is not an option on the table.
I think it is an option on the table. I mean, do we go back to who's serving our neediest residents and citizens between Habitat and CRHA? The CRHA, right?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. But then the question is like, does that extra 100 really help that much?
Whereas with
I don't
Habitat
know
or
either
any of
way
the
on that.
others, it does. You know, that makes a difference.
Maybe it does with Habitat. I mean, I don't have any good reason, like, again, I don't have any like core truth into their books to make this statement, but my hunch is that Habitat thing is gonna happen either way. Whether we give them 100 of the 360 they need, or whether we give none of the 360 they need.
So the LEAP owner request. I mean, could we fund that at 50 and then the balance of the 50 go to CRHA? I know that that's small dollars to them, but it's still putting money where, I don't know, where we've identified the need.
I'm
Yeah, I
okay with
mean,
that, Emily.
It shows our
Yeah.
value. I mean, it shows every dollar counts, even if it's
Yeah.
small.
I mean, part of me says with CRHA, we hear that you want the 750. That's all the money we have. Take half our money. And let's split the other. And does that 50 grand really make a difference? Yes or no? That's part of me is on that, on the 30 million. Let's circle back again. We're over time too. So let's see if we can sort of bring this home. Yes, Rory, you got your hand up.
I don't.
No?
You're
Okay,
just
yeah.
expecting him to talk.
No, well, I don't expect him to put his hand up ever. It was confusing me. All right,
That
so,
was something closer to a face palm, I think.
all right, so let's get back to where we were. So right now, what I'm hearing is, of the 100 delta, let's go back to the 100 delta. We've got an idea of 50 to LEAP and 50 to CRHA of that remaining delta. Is that where you want, is that where your head is at, Emily? All right, S. Lisa, are you in favor, object, is that
I'm
where your
in
head?
agreement with that.
All
I'm in
right, that's where your
agreement.
head's at more or less. And then you, sir? Rory?
Seems reasonable to me, I think.
Okay, so to make sure we've got this right, 375 just, sorry. Now we're up to 4.25, right? To CRHA, 150 LEAP, 100. And I'm just gonna old fashioned add it up just to make sure we haven't, and then 75 to Habitat. So that's 425, 475, 575, 675. What am I missing? We were at 150. So that's 575, 675. I'm 25
Yeah, no,
grand
that's that
short.
up. All on the screen.
What am I missing? 150, 425, 75, 100, 750. There we go. Okay. So 600, 750. Yep, there it goes. All right. So that's our recommendation. Okay. So I'm not sure how I'm going to present this for council. I'm probably going to do a couple of light edits on the report to send it back and then just put a companion unless there's a better way for me to slip it into the staff report, just saying specific HAC recommendations and look at the format. I mean, but I want to be brief since
Yeah,
it's due tomorrow.
well, I think with the staff report, if you send us a copy of this, we can find a way to integrate it, we'll integrate it into the staff report, you know, and that will be one report.
I think the way we did this, it's pretty straightforward to integrate it. The staff conditions
Exactly.
were if PHA gets the money this year, which they didn't apply, so they won't. And this is how we chose to reallocate it in the recommendation. And it's that simple. We didn't knock anyone down.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that I mean, perhaps Alex, having heard all of this, could be in agreement and carry the day and say, look, I mean, PHA they didn't make the application. That money is now available. Let's move on. This is, you know, does that make sense, Alex? Since
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. If
the
you can
caveat is gone. I
email-
mean,
email us that table.
therefore, you know, we recommend rearranging the allocation of the delta. Okay, yeah, let's do that. So, Rory, can you pretty this up 1/2 level and send it to me, and then I'll put a little cover note on it and send it over?
Sure.
Cool. You know, and by 1/2, I just mean, you know, send me one clean, just, you know, send me the sheet. You know, I'll,
Yeah, I thought I already made it pretty nice.
I think you did too, but I haven't seen your fonts. I mean, you know, you do what you do. And just zip it over to me. I'll throw in a 1-paragraph cover letter on it and we'll go from there. Does that make sense? Any objections? Hot dog. All right. I thank all of you. If there's no further business, and I don't believe there's any attendee, so there is no public. That's that. Okay.
Thanks,
Unless
everybody.
there's something I'm missing, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much for I know we did a huge data dump on everybody. I thank you for spinning it as that's fast.
Should we like make a motion real quick and vote on it, or?
Okay, you want to do that? Fine.
I move
Like
to
fancy boys
adopt
over at the
these
planning commission.
HAC recommendations on screen.
Second that motion.
Any discussion? No? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
I'm
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, goodbye. Thank you.
Bill is throwing us out.
I'm throwing you out. All right, thank you very much,
Thanks
folks.
all.
Take care.